When my daughter-in-law told me to stop visiting their home, I smiled instead of crying. I told her I understood, that maybe they just needed some space. But when I walked out that door, carrying the little jar of cookies I'd baked for my grandson, I knew something had changed forever. Before continuing, please subscribe to our channel and like our video. People often say families break suddenly, but in my experience, they don't. They don't shatter like glass. They fade, little by little, like an old photograph left in the sun too long. That day, the air smelled of rain, the street was quiet, and my shoes made soft sounds against the pavement. I remember passing their mailbox, my son's name still printed beside hers, even though in my heart, I already felt she wanted to erase mine. My name is Margaret. I'm 62 years old, retired from my job at the library, and I've lived most of my life in this small, quiet town in Oregon. It's the kind of place where everyone waves when they drive by, and where the grocery store clerk remembers your birthday. For years, my life was simple, peaceful really. I had a son named Ethan, my only child. He was quiet as a boy, always reading, always curious. When his father passed away, Ethan was only 14, and from that day on, it was just the two of us, mother and son. We had each other, and that felt enough. I still remember the evenings when he'd sit at the kitchen table, finishing his homework while I graded papers from the library's reading group. He used to hum softly, always the same tune, a habit he carried into adulthood. Ethan grew up to be a good man, kind, thoughtful, but perhaps too gentle for this world. When he met Claire, I saw something shift in him. He laughed more. He looked at her the way his father once looked at me, with quiet admiration, as if he couldn't believe she was real. Claire was beautiful, elegant in that effortless way that made people notice her without her trying. She had this calmness about her, like a polished stone. When I met her for the first time, she called me Mrs. Turner and brought me a bouquet of lilies. I told her to call me Margaret, but she smiled and said, "Not yet. Let's keep it proper for now." That should have been my first clue. In the beginning, we got along fine. She'd invite me over for dinner, and I'd bring homemade pies or knit sweaters for their future children. I was already dreaming ahead. When Ethan and Claire got married, I cried through the whole ceremony, not because I was sad, but because I was proud. He looked so happy standing beside her, and I thought, maybe now he won't be alone anymore. For a while, I believed that. They bought a small house 2 streets away from mine, and I'd visit on Sundays. Claire would brew tea, Ethan would mow the lawn, and I'd sit on the porch, feeling the warmth of a family growing around me. Then one day, Claire announced she was pregnant. I remember hugging her, tightly. She seemed surprised by it, as if she wasn't used to being held like that, but I didn't care. My heart was overflowing. A grandchild, the kind of joy that fills the empty corners of a home. When little Noah was born, I thought life had reached its sweetest season. He had Ethan's eyes and my husband's smile. Every time he giggled, I felt something inside me heal. I'd visit often, sometimes too often. I suppose I'd help with laundry, cook a meal, or just rock Noah to sleep while Claire rested. She never said anything rude, but sometimes her silence said more than words. I'd catch her glancing at me while I held Noah, not angry, just uneasy, like she didn't know where to place me in her world. Still, I ignored it because I loved my son, and I loved that little boy more than anything. The seasons passed, and Noah grew from a baby into a curious little child. He loved building towers with blocks, and every time they'd fall, he'd laugh and say, "Again, Grandma." I could spend hours with him, and even when he tired me out, my heart stayed light. But as the years went on, Claire's visits to my house became less frequent. Phone calls turned shorter, and when I'd ask to come over, she'd say, "Oh, we're busy today." Maybe next week, Margaret. At first, I didn't think much of it. New mothers get tired. Families get busy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being quietly pushed away. Ethan never said anything. Not directly. But there was a distance in his voice. He'd call once a week. And sometimes I'd hear Claire's voice in the background. Soft but sharp, like a whisper made of glass. Then came the day I can't forget. It was Noah's 7th birthday. I'd baked his favorite cake, chocolate with little sugar stars on top. I even wrapped a small gift. Storybook about a boy who wanted to touch the moon. I remember walking up their driveway, my heart full of excitement. But when I rang the bell, it wasn't Ethan who answered. It was Claire. She stood there, wearing a blue dress, her hair perfectly tied back, her expression calm. Too calm. Margaret, she said softly. You didn't have to come. I laughed nervously. Well, it's his birthday. Of course I did. She didn't move aside. Behind her, I could hear children laughing, Noah's friends maybe, but I couldn't see him. After a pause, she sighed. Ethan should have called you, I frowned. Called me? Why? She looked down. He thought it might be too much today, too noisy, too many kids around. I smiled again, that same polite smile that hides hurt. It's fine, I said. I just wanted to drop this off. I handed her the cake. She hesitated before taking it. Then I gave her the little gift bag. She accepted it. But she didn't invite me in. And in that silence, I realized what had been happening all along. I wasn't part of their life anymore. I was just an occasional visitor, a reminder of something she didn't want. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the leftover icing bowl still half full. I stared at the empty chair across from me, the one my husband used to sit in. I whispered, "Did I do something wrong?" But the only answer was the ticking clock. Over the next few weeks, I tried to tell myself I was overthinking it. Maybe they were just busy. Maybe it would pass. But then, the visit stopped entirely. One afternoon, I walked by their house on my way to the store. I saw Noah playing in the yard, his hair longer now, his laughter bright. When he spotted me, his face lit up. He waved, shouting, "Grandma!" But before I could wave back, Claire stepped out onto the porch. She called his name once, just once, and he ran inside. I stood there, frozen, and that was the moment my heart broke quietly. From that day on, I decided to give them space. I told myself that love sometimes means stepping back, but deep down I kept wondering why. Why did she push me away? What had I done that was so wrong? What secret lay behind that calm smile of hers? I didn't know then, but I would, because secrets, no matter how well hidden, have a way of finding their light. And one day, I would learn the truth. The truth she thought I'd never know. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected, too quiet. My days used to feel full, the gentle kind of full that comes from simple things. Baking bread in the morning, watering the plants on the porch, folding Noah's little shirts when I'd visit. Now, my house echoed differently. The laughter was gone. Only the sound of the old clock in the hallway kept me company. I still called Ethan sometimes, not often. I didn't want to seem like the kind of mother who couldn't let go. He always answered politely, always kindly, but there was a distance in his tone, like he was speaking from behind a wall. He'd say things like, "Sorry, Mom. Claire's been really busy lately," or "We've just had a lot going on with Noah's school." I'd nod, even though he couldn't see me, and reply, "Of course, sweetheart. Take your time. I understand." But I didn't. Not really, because how do you understand the slow fading of someone you raised with your own hands? A few months passed. Winter came, long, gray, and unforgiving. One evening, while I was making soup, I heard a knock at the door. When I opened it, Ethan stood there, holding a small box. He looked tired, his eyes sunken, his shoulders heavy. It had been weeks since I'd last seen him in person, and for a brief second I forgot everything. I just hugged him. He hugged me back, but it was brief. When he pulled away, I noticed his smile didn't reach his eyes. "I can't stay long," he said softly. "Claire's waiting in the car." "Oh," I said, trying to sound cheerful. "At least come in for a minute. The soup's still warm." He hesitated, looking over his shoulder as if time itself were chasing him. Then he sighed. "Just a minute." I led him inside, and the air between us felt unfamiliar, like two old friends pretending they still knew each other. He sat at the kitchen table, tapping his fingers on the box. Finally, he pushed it toward me. "Claire thought maybe you'd like these," he said. I opened it. Inside were some of Noah's old toys, a small wooden train, a crayon drawing of a house, and a tiny sweater I'd knitted years ago. I smiled softly. "I made this when he was 2, Ethan nodded. "Yeah, he's outgrown most of these." There was something in his voice, not sadness exactly, but guilt, a quiet kind that hides between words. I asked him if everything was all right. He looked down, tracing the edge of the table. "Mom," he said after a moment, "you know how grateful I am for everything you've done, right?" "Of course," I said, though my heart began to ache. She feels like things are too crowded sometimes. She wants some space for our own family." "Our own family?" I repeated, trying not to let my voice shake. "As if I'm not part of it?" He sighed. "It's not like that. She just needs boundaries. She says sometimes you make her feel watched." I froze. "Watched?" I repeated quietly. He nodded, eyes still averted. "She says you question her choices a lot. About Noah, about the house, about things." I didn't know what to say. I'd never judged her. Not once. I'd only offered help when it was needed. But there it was. The invisible wall finally given words. I smiled gently, forcing calm into my voice. "All right," I said. "If she needs space, I'll give it. Tell her she doesn't need to worry." Ethan looked relieved, and that hurt even more. He stood up, hugged me again, and whispered, "Thanks, Mom. It'll just be for a while. I promise." Then he left. I watched from the window as he walked to the car. Through the frosted glass, I saw Claire in the passenger seat. She didn't look toward the house. Her face was turned straight ahead, expressionless, distant, and as the car pulled away, I whispered, "Goodbye, my son," not because he was gone forever, but because I felt him slipping away, piece by piece. That night, I couldn't sleep. The soup went cold on the stove, and the clock kept ticking louder than usual. I kept replaying his words. "She feels watched." Watched? Had I done something that made her uncomfortable? Had I said something I shouldn't have? The next morning, I decided to write her a letter, a gentle one. No blame, no bitterness, just an honest note from one woman to another. "Dear Claire, I hope you're doing well. I just wanted to say I'm sorry if I ever made you uncomfortable. That was never my intention. I only wanted to help and love the 3 of you the best way I knew how. You're a wonderful wife and mother, and I admire you for the way you take care of Ethan and Noah. Please know that I'll always respect your space. But my door and my heart will always stay open for you. With love." Margaret. I slipped it into their mailbox later that afternoon, even though my hands trembled as I did. I waited for some kind of reply, a call, a note, even a message, but nothing came. Weeks turned into months. I saw less and less of my son, and not at all of my grandson. Every now and then, I'd pass by their house on my evening walks, just to see if the lights were on, if laughter still lived there. Once, I saw a second car parked outside, one I didn't recognize, a shiny black sedan, newer than anything Ethan could afford. At first, I thought it belonged to a friend, but as time went on, I saw it there often. Same spot, same time, almost every Friday. One evening, as I walked by, I caught a glimpse through the kitchen window. Claire stood there, her phone pressed to her ear, smiling in a way I hadn't seen before. A light, easy smile like the kind she never gave me. For a moment, I thought maybe Ethan had made her laugh, but when I looked closer, I saw Ethan's car wasn't in the driveway. A quiet unease began to grow inside me. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I wasn't that kind of woman. But there was something in her expression, something secret that I couldn't ignore. A few days later, I went to the grocery store. I was reaching for a carton of milk when I heard two familiar voices behind me. Soft, hushed, almost like a whisper. It was Claire, and she wasn't alone. I turned slightly, pretending to check the shelf. She was with a man, tall, dark-haired, well-dressed. They stood close. Too close. She was laughing. That same easy, radiant laugh I'd seen through the window. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't pull away. My heart sank, not out of judgment, but out of a quiet, heavy heartbreak I couldn't explain. I didn't say anything. I didn't confront her. I just walked away, my hands trembling as I pushed my cart toward the exit. The milk spilled halfway home. I didn't even notice. That night, I sat in the dark, the same thought circling my mind like a haunting melody. Does Ethan know? The next morning, I convinced myself I had misunderstood. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like. Maybe she had friends I didn't know about. But something in me changed. I stopped sleeping soundly. I stopped smiling as much. And every time the phone rang, I hoped it was Ethan, calling to say everything was okay. But it never was. Months passed again, and spring came with its soft rain and blooming lilacs. One afternoon, I got a call from Ethan. His voice was calm, but there was a strain to it. "Mom, I wanted to tell you," he said slowly. "We're thinking of moving. Maybe somewhere a bit farther. Claire got a new job opportunity." My stomach dropped. "Moving?" I whispered. "How far?" He paused. "Seattle, maybe? It's still early, but we're considering it." Seattle. That was nearly 4 hours away. "Oh," I said quietly. "That's wonderful. I'm happy for her." There was silence. Then he said softly, "I know this is hard, but it might be good for us. A fresh start. A fresh start." Those words hit harder than I expected. They sounded like an ending. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. A new city, new people, new life, and me, left behind. I went to bed early, but just before I fell asleep, I thought I heard something outside. A car. I peeked through the curtains. A familiar black sedan sat quietly by the curb. Its headlights were off. And then I saw her. Claire. Standing near the car, speaking softly to someone inside. She looked nervous, glancing around. Her arms crossed, the door opened slightly, and a man stepped out, the same man I'd seen at the grocery store. He said something, I couldn't hear what, and she nodded quickly, brushing a tear from her cheek. Then he touched her arm, and they stood there for a moment, before she hurried back inside. The car drove away. I stood there in the dark, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it. That night, I realized there was something my son didn't know, something she had hidden well, and suddenly I was torn. Do I tell him? Do I risk breaking his heart again? Or do I stay silent and carry the weight of what I'd seen alone? I didn't know it then, but that choice, that silence, would change everything. Because sometimes the truth doesn't just hurt, It destroys quietly, from the inside out. And she thought I'd never learn the truth about her secret, but I already had, even if I didn't yet know how deep it went. When people talk about heartbreak, they make it sound like a single moment, a sharp, clean pain that cuts and then fades. But in real life, heartbreak doesn't come all at once. It drips slowly, one small truth at a time, until one day, you wake up and realize the life you thought you knew isn't real anymore. That realization came to me one gray morning in late spring. I was sitting at my kitchen table, reading an old letter my husband had written years ago, a simple note he'd left inside a book once. It said, "If you ever feel lonely, look for me in the quiet places. I'll always be there." I smiled faintly, and for some reason, it gave me the courage to do something I'd been avoiding for weeks. I decided to visit Ethan, unannounced. Just once more, before they moved. The drive to their house felt longer than usual. The trees along the road were full and green, and the air smelled of rain and earth. As I parked at the curb, I saw the "for sale" sign staked in the lawn. It made my chest tighten. I walked up the path, my heart beating softly but steadily. There was a black sedan parked across the street again, the same one I'd seen before. But I told myself it didn't matter. I was here to see my son. I knocked once, no answer. I tried again, a little louder. Finally, the door opened. It was Noah. He looked surprised, but happy. "Grandma," he said, his voice bright, my eyes filled instantly. "Oh, sweetheart." I bent down and hugged him tightly. He'd grown taller, his hair falling into his eyes. Before I could ask where his parents were, I heard footsteps behind him. It was Claire. She froze when she saw me. "Margaret," she said, her tone controlled, like someone carefully holding back an emotion. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I was nearby. I just wanted to see Noah before you moved. I won't stay long." Her eyes flickered to Noah, then back to me. "Ethan isn't home," she said. "He's at work." "That's all right," I replied softly. "I just wanted to say hello," she hesitated. Then with a sigh, she stepped aside and let me in. The house was quieter than I remembered. Boxes lined the hallway, and the air smelled faintly of cardboard and coffee. Noah showed me his drawings, chattering excitedly as children do. Claire stood in the kitchen, pretending to tidy up, but I could feel her eyes on me. At one point, Noah ran off to his room to get another drawing. That's when Claire finally spoke. "Margaret," she said quietly, "I wish you had called first." I nodded, keeping my tone gentle. "I know. I'm sorry, I needed to see him once more." She folded her arms. "You make this harder than it needs to be." Her words were calm, but they carried a weight. I looked at her for a moment. "Claire," I said softly, "I don't want to be in your way. I never did. I just want my family to be at peace." She let out a long breath. "It's complicated." Something in her voice cracked slightly. Not anger, but exhaustion. Then, to my surprise, she sat down across from me at the table. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was Noah humming faintly from the next room. Finally, she whispered, "I never meant to hurt anyone." I looked at her carefully. "What do you mean?" She didn't meet my eyes. Instead, she stared at the window, at the drizzle beginning to fall outside. "Ethan's a good man," she said. "The best. But sometimes good people can't give you what you need." Her voice trembled slightly. I stayed silent, partly because I didn't know what to say, and partly because I was afraid of what she might say next. Then, she looked at me. And there was something in her eyes I hadn't seen before. Guilt. Real, heavy guilt. "I made a mistake," she whispered. The room seemed to still. "What kind of mistake?" I asked quietly. She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, Noah ran back into the room, holding up a paper airplane. "Look, Grandma," he said proudly. I smiled, though my heart was pounding. "It's perfect," I said. "Just like you," Claire stood abruptly. "I think it's time for your grandmother to go now," she said softly, her voice shaking. Noah's face fell. "But why? She just got here." "Come on, honey," she said, forcing a smile. "Let's give Grandma away from the door." I didn't argue. I could tell she was barely holding herself together. As I stepped outside, the rain began to fall harder. "Goodbye, Noah," I whispered, hugging him again. "Will you come to our new house?" he asked. I smiled faintly. "If your mom says I can." He nodded, still too young to understand. When I looked up, Claire was watching me, her face pale, her eyes red. For a moment, she looked like she wanted to say something more, but she didn't. She just closed the door softly. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her words. I made a mistake. The next day, I called Ethan. He sounded distracted, hurried. I asked if everything was all right. He said, "Yeah, of course." "Why?" I hesitated, then said, "I stopped by the house yesterday." "Claire said you were busy." He went silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "Mom, I wish you hadn't done that." "Why not?" I asked gently. "Because she's been under a lot of stress. Work's been hard and things between us have been tense." My heart sank. "Tense? Is everything okay between you two?" "It will be," he said quickly, as if trying to convince himself. "I just need to figure some things out." Then softer. "Claire's been different lately. Distant. I don't know what to do." I wanted to tell him what I'd seen. I wanted to say that I thought I knew the reason, but something in his voice, that quiet desperation, made me stop. He didn't need more pain. Not now, so I stayed silent. We talked for a few more minutes. Then he said he had to go. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, listening to the rain tapping against the window. I whispered to the empty room, "I think she's lying to you, my son." But of course, he couldn't hear me. Days turned into weeks. The move grew closer. I tried to keep my distance, but every fiber of my heart was restless. Then one afternoon, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Just my name, written in neat handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a photograph. It was blurry, clearly taken from a distance. But it was enough. It showed Claire, standing beside the same man I'd seen before. His hand on her arm, her eyes soft, smiling up at him. On the back of the photo, someone had written a single sentence in small printed letters. "You deserve to know." I sat there, frozen. The world seemed to tilt slightly, like reality had shifted. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Later that night, I tried calling Ethan. No answer. I tried again the next morning. Still nothing. Finally, 2 days later, he called back. His voice sounded tired, rough. "Mom, sorry I missed your calls. Things have been a lot." I hesitated, then said, "Ethan, can you come by? Just for a few minutes. There's something I need to tell you." He paused. "What's going on?" "I'd rather not say over the phone." He agreed reluctantly. "I'll come tomorrow after work." That night I barely slept. The photo sat on the table beside me like a quiet shadow. I kept wondering who sent it, how they knew me, and why now. When Ethan arrived the next day, he looked exhausted, like someone carrying too many invisible weights. He sat down, rubbing his temples. "Okay, Mom, what's going on?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I slid the photo toward him. He looked at it, and for a moment, he didn't move. Then, slowly, he picked it up. His face went pale. "Where did you get this?" he whispered. "It came in the mail," I said softly. "I don't know who sent it." He stared at it for a long time. Then he shook his head. "This could be anything," he said. "Maybe it's old. Maybe it's not what it looks like." I nodded gently. Maybe, but his voice broke when he said it. And in that moment, I knew he believed what I already feared. He put the photo down and pressed his hands against his face. "I can't do this," he whispered. I reached across the table and took his hand. "You don't have to decide anything now," I said quietly. "But you deserve the truth." He nodded, tears in his eyes. After a moment, he stood up. "Thank you, Mom," he said softly. "I need to go." And then he left, without another word. 2 days later, he called again. His voice was steady but hollow. "You were right," he said simply. "I didn't ask how he found out." "I didn't need to," he continued. "She told me everything." It had been going on for almost a year. A year. He said she'd met the man through work, that it started as a friendship, then became something else. She said she was lonely, he whispered. "She said I wasn't there for her." I closed my eyes. There are no words for that kind of pain. After a pause, I said softly, "I'm so sorry, Ethan." He let out a broken laugh. "Don't be. I should have seen it. I wanted to tell him it wasn't his fault, that love can blind even the wisest heart. But all I could say was, 'Come home, son.' And he did. That night, he came back, not to his house, but to mine. He sat at the same kitchen table where we'd shared so many meals before, and this time he cried. Not loudly, just quietly, the way men do when they've run out of strength. I held his hand the whole time. He stayed with me for several days. During that time, Claire tried calling. He didn't answer. Then one evening, a car pulled up outside, the black sedan. I saw her step out, her face pale, her eyes swollen. She stood at the porch clutching her coat. "Ethan," she called softly. "Please, just talk to me." He didn't move. He just stared at the floor. So I went to the door instead. "Claire?" I said, my voice quiet but steady. "He needs time." Her lips trembled. "Margaret, I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't want to hurt him." Tears filled her eyes. "I made a mistake. I thought he'd never find out." There it was, the truth spoken aloud. She thought I'd never learn it. But I had, and now, so had he. I looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time, I saw her not as an enemy, but as a woman who had lost her way. "Still," I said softly, "some mistakes can't be undone." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry," and she left. That night, the house was silent. Ethan sat by the window, staring out at the rain. He didn't speak for a long time. Finally, he said, "She told me the other man ended it weeks ago. That's why she wanted to move. She said she wanted a clean start." He turned toward me, eyes red. "Do you think people can really change, Mom?" I took a deep breath. "I think people can learn," I said. "But sometimes learning comes too late." He nodded slowly, looking down. Then he whispered, "She thought I'd never find out." I reached for his hand. "But you did," I said softly. "And now you get to decide what comes next." The next morning, he packed his things and went back to the house. Not to reconcile, but to end it. I watched from my porch as his car disappeared down the road. The sky was heavy with clouds, and I whispered a silent prayer. For him, for her, and for the child caught between them. That day marked the true turning point. The truth was no longer hidden. And even though it broke us all in different ways, there was a strange kind of peace in knowing, because sometimes the hardest part of love is seeing what was always there and learning to let go of what can't be mended. The days after Ethan confronted Claire passed like a slow, heavy fog. He stayed with me for a week, barely speaking, barely eating. I didn't ask questions. Some silences are better left untouched. Instead, I did what mothers do. I cooked warm meals, kept the lights low, and stayed near enough for him to know he wasn't alone. At night, I'd hear him pacing in the guest room. The floor creaked softly under his steps. Sometimes I'd hear the sound of quiet weeping, and I'd close my eyes and whisper a prayer, not for answers, but for peace. On the 7th morning, he finally came to the kitchen early, his eyes tired, but his voice calm. "Mom," he said softly, "I'm going back to the house today." I turned from the stove and nodded. "Do you want me to come with you?" He shook his head. "No, I need to do this alone." I understood. There are some journeys a mother can't walk beside her child, even when every part of her heart wants to. Before he left, he hugged me. It was the kind of hug that said 1,000 things at once. "Thank you. I'm scared. I love you." I held him tightly. "Take your time," I whispered. "Don't say anything you'll regret." He nodded. "I won't." Then he left. That day was long. The hours stretched thin, the house too quiet. I tried to read, but the words blurred together. I tried to bake, but I forgot the sugar. By late afternoon, I finally heard the car pull into the driveway. Ethan came in, shoulders slumped, face pale. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in one day. I didn't ask how it went. He sat down at the table, and after a long silence, he said, "It's over." Just those 2 words. I sat across from him, waiting for him to continue. "She admitted everything," he said quietly. "She said it's been over for a while, but she didn't know how to tell me. She said she still cares about me, but she's not in love with me anymore." He laughed softly, a hollow, painful sound. "How do you stop loving someone you promised forever to?" I didn't have an answer, so I reached across the table and took his hand in mine. Sometimes touch speaks what words cannot. After a long pause, I asked, "What about Noah?" He looked down. "She said she wants to share custody." I told her I'd agree for his sake. I nodded slowly. Children need both parents, even when those parents are broken. The next few weeks were hard. Ethan moved his things out of their house, and she and Noah stayed with her sister for a while. He found a small apartment downtown, barely big enough for one, but he said it felt manageable. I helped him unpack, folding his clothes into drawers that felt too empty. He placed a framed photo of Noah on the bedside table, and for a moment, his eyes softened. "I'll have him every other weekend," he said quietly. "I don't want him to feel like he's losing both of us." I smiled gently. "He won't. He has you." He nodded, though he didn't look convinced. Life fell into a new rhythm, not the one any of us wanted, but one we learned to live with. Ethan went back to work. I saw Noah on the weekends when he visited his father. Those days were bright spots. The laughter, the smell of pancakes, the sound of little footsteps running down the hall. But even in those moments, I saw the confusion in Noah's eyes. He didn't understand why his parents didn't live together anymore. He'd ask small, painful questions like, "Why doesn't Mommy come here with me?" Or, "Will Daddy come to the new house too?" And every time, Ethan would take a breath, kneel down beside him, and say softly, "Mommy and Daddy just live in different places now. But we both love you very much." Noah would nod, accepting it in that innocent way children do. But I could see the small cracks beginning to form in his little heart. One Sunday evening, after Noah had fallen asleep, Ethan and I sat on the porch, watching the sun dip behind the trees. The sky glowed in shades of gold and pink. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I saw her today." I turned to him, waiting. "She came to drop off Noah." We talked for a bit. I nodded. "How was it?" He took a deep breath. "She said she's sorry. Again. She said she's been going to counseling. That she wants to be better. For herself. For Noah." His voice trembled slightly. "She asked if I could ever forgive her." I looked at him carefully. "What did you say?" He stared at his hands. "I told her I don't know yet. But I don't hate her." A small breeze moved through the porch. I reached over and placed my hand on his shoulder. "That's a good start," I said softly. He nodded. "I just want peace, Mom. I'm tired of being angry." As time went on, that peace began to take shape. Slowly, gently, in small moments, Ethan and Claire learned how to co-parent. They attended Noah's school plays together, stood on opposite sides of the gym, but always waved to each other with a quiet respect. There were no harsh words anymore, no late-night arguments or bitter phone calls. Just the soft, tentative rebuilding of something that wasn't marriage anymore, but still resembled family. And through it all, I stayed in the background, watching, listening, praying. Sometimes, when Noah stayed with me, he'd ask to call his mom before bed. I'd dial the number and hand him the phone. I could hear Claire's gentle voice on the other end, sweet, patient, full of love for her child. It made me realize something. She might have failed as a wife, but she hadn't failed as a mother, and that mattered more than anything. One afternoon, a few months later, I saw Claire again. I was in the park with Noah. He was chasing butterflies, his laughter echoing through the trees. When I turned, she was standing there, a few feet away, watching us quietly. For a moment, we both froze. Then she smiled, a small, hesitant smile. "May I join you?" she asked softly. I nodded. "Of course." We sat together on a bench, watching Noah run. Neither of us spoke for a while. The sound of children playing filled the silence between us. Finally, she said, "He's been so happy lately. Ethan's been doing such a good job with him." I smiled. "He's trying his best." She nodded slowly. "I know. I didn't make it easy." Her eyes filled with tears. "I just want him to know I'm not that person anymore." I looked at her carefully. There was no defensiveness in her voice, no excuses, just quiet remorse. "You can tell him," I said gently. "Maybe not today, but when the time feels right." She wiped her eyes. "Do you hate me?" The question caught me off guard. I looked at her for a long moment. Then I shook my head. "No," I said softly. "I did for a while, or maybe I thought I did. But hate doesn't heal anything. And I've learned that people break when they forget how to be honest. You're trying to fix that now." "That's something," she exhaled shakily. "Thank you." We sat in silence again, watching Noah's little hands reach for the sky. For the first time in a long while, I felt no anger, only quiet sadness, and a strange, gentle compassion. Months passed. The seasons changed again, and life somehow found its rhythm. Ethan smiled more often. He started spending time with friends again, took up hiking, even adopted a small rescue dog named Luna. He told me once, "I still think about her sometimes, but it doesn't hurt the same way anymore." That's when I knew he was healing. Claire continued co-parenting gracefully. She never tried to get back together, never made promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she focused on Noah, and herself, and Noah. He remained the thread that connected us all. Every time I saw him, I was reminded that life, no matter how broken, still finds ways to love through the cracks. One evening, as I tucked Noah into bed at my house, he looked up at me and said, "Grandma, are you happy?" I smiled, surprised by the question. "Yes, sweetheart. I think I am." He grinned sleepily. "Daddy said you're the strongest person he knows." I chuckled softly. "Did he say that?" He nodded. "He said you taught him that love isn't about never being hurt. It's about not giving up, even when it hurts." I felt tears fill my eyes. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "Your daddy's right." Then I turned off the lamp and sat quietly beside him, listening to his breathing slow, and for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel empty. It felt peaceful. A few weeks later, Ethan invited Claire and Noah over for dinner. It wasn't for reconciliation, it was for closure. He cooked spaghetti, their old family favorite. When I arrived, the table was set with mismatched plates, candles flickering softly in the dim light. The atmosphere was awkward at first, but gentle. They talked about Noah's school, laughed at small memories. No accusations, no blame. Just three people trying to rewrite the ending of something that once broke them. At one point, I looked at Claire, and she met my eyes. She mouthed the words, "Thank you." I nodded and smiled faintly. That night, after they left, Ethan stood at the sink, washing dishes. He looked at me and said, "You know what's strange? I don't feel angry anymore." "That's not strange," I said softly. "That's healing." As the months turned into years, the pain softened into memory. Not forgotten, never that, but reshaped into something bearable. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, I'd sit by the window and think of everything that had happened, the lies, the heartbreak, the truth I wasn't supposed to find. And I'd think of how life can break you and still bless you in the same breath. Because in losing what we thought was forever, we sometimes find what's real: honesty, resilience, grace. That was the hardest lesson I learned, that even when someone betrays your trust, you don't have to live inside the bitterness. You can choose compassion. You can choose peace. And when you do, the world slowly starts to feel kind again. It's been almost 5 years since that day, the day the truth came out, the day everything changed. Sometimes when I think back on it, it feels like a dream I once had, a quiet ache from another life. Ethan is doing well now. He still lives in his little apartment downtown, though he spends most of his weekends at my house with Noah. He laughs more, not the hollow kind, but the kind that sounds like freedom. And Claire, she still lives in the same town. She and Ethan have found a rhythm that works, a gentle friendship built on mutual respect and the love they share for their son. We see her sometimes at birthdays, school events, or the occasional Sunday lunch. And though our relationship will never be what it once was, there's no bitterness between us anymore, just quiet understanding. People often ask me, "Don't you ever wish things had turned out differently?" And the truth is, sometimes yes, sometimes. When I watch Noah draw pictures of his family, I wish the picture was whole. A mother, a father, a son under one roof, one heart. But then I remember that whole doesn't always mean happy. Sometimes, the pieces of a broken thing can shine even brighter when they're put back together with care. One summer afternoon, Ethan and I took Noah to the lake, the same one his father used to take us 2 years ago. The sun was warm, and the air smelled of pine and sunlight. Noah ran ahead, his laughter echoing across the water. I sat on the bench, watching them skip stones. Ethan came and sat beside me. He was quiet for a long time, then said softly, "You know, Mom, I used to think love was something that either lasted forever or failed completely." He smiled faintly. "But now I see it's neither. It changes shape. It doesn't always leave. Sometimes it just learns to live somewhere else." I nodded slowly, my heart full of quiet pride. "You've grown wiser than I ever was," I said. He chuckled. "I learned from you." Later that evening, after they'd gone home, I stayed by the lake until the sky turned gold and then gray. The water was still. A few ducks floated lazily by. I could hear the faint hum of distant laughter, families packing up, children calling to their parents, and I thought about all the seasons my life had seen, the joys, the heartbreaks, the silences that once felt endless. I thought about Claire, how I once saw her as the woman who stole my son's happiness, and later, how I came to see her as a woman who simply lost her way. And I thought about myself, how I'd learned that strength doesn't always mean standing tall. Sometimes, it means sitting quietly in the dark and choosing to forgive. One evening not long ago, Claire came by unexpectedly. I was in the garden, trimming the roses. She stood by the gate, holding a small basket. "Hi, Margaret," she said softly. Her voice still carried that calm gentleness, but now there was something humbler beneath it. "Hello?" "Claire," I said, wiping my hands on my apron. "It's been a while," she smiled nervously. "I brought you some muffins." Noah helped. I took the basket and smiled. "Thank you." "That's very kind." We stood there for a moment in silence, the summer wind moving softly through the garden. Then she said, "I wanted to tell you something." I looked at her, waiting. "I'm getting married again," she said quietly, "to someone I met at work, a good man. We've taken things slow. He knows everything about my past." I nodded. "I'm glad, Claire, truly." Her eyes filled with tears. "I just wanted you to hear it from me. I didn't want you to find out from someone else." I reached out and touched her hand. "Thank you," I said. "That means a lot." She smiled through her tears. "I'm trying to do things differently this time." I squeezed her hand gently. "That's all anyone can do." After she left, I sat in the garden for a long time, watching the sky shift into shades of pink and orange. The roses swayed softly in the breeze, their petals catching the last light of the sun. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. The truth, no matter how painful, had set us all free. It tore our lives apart for a time. Yes, but it also gave us a chance to rebuild, not in the same shape as before, but in one that fit who we had become. Now, when Noah visits, he tells me stories about both his homes, about the new puppy at his mom's house, about how his dad takes him hiking on weekends. His world is bigger now, not broken, just different. And every time he runs into my arms, I thank God that through all the pain, we never stopped being a family. Sometimes, late at night, I still think about the day I first realized something was wrong. That quiet afternoon when Claire closed the door on me with the birthday cake still warm in my hands. I used to see that day as the beginning of everything that went wrong. Now, I see it differently. That day didn't end something. It began the long, difficult journey that would eventually bring truth, understanding, and forgiveness. Because without the breaking, none of us would have learned how to heal. If I've learned anything in this life, it's that people are more complicated than their mistakes. We carry our regrets like fragile glass, and sometimes we cut others with the sharp edges of our pain. But love, real love, finds a way to soften even the hardest truths. It doesn't erase the past. It just teaches you to live with it without bitterness, without blame, and maybe that's enough. So now, when I sit alone in my kitchen, with the kettle humming softly and the evening light pouring through the window, I don't feel the old ache anymore. I feel gratitude for the son who found his strength, for the woman who found her peace, and for the little boy who became our reason to keep trying. And as I look at their photo, Ethan, Noah and Claire standing together, smiling, I whisper to the quiet room, she thought I'd never learn the truth about her secret. But the truth, in the end, wasn't just hers. It belonged to all of us.